welcome to a new episode of House of Decline. And on this episode, we have a man I have followed for a while on Twitter. Got to know him through Twitter. Got to know him through his brilliant cartoon work. You know him from The New Yorker and other publications. It's at Hack Cartoonist, Jason Novak. How you doing today, Jason?
Good.
Good is good. It's a beautiful day in California where you are.
It is. Perfect weather.
You're out walking on the street. Nothing's on fire yet.
No, that happens tonight.
Is that
so
a big...
people can see.
Yeah.
Street lighting.
Is that a big problem in the area that you're in? Is like, are wildfires constantly happening?
Wildfire. Well, there were a few years, obviously, where it was really, really bad, and we had, in the middle of the pandemic, we had some. But it seems like a lot of that has kind of been burned off now. The fires aren't happening as much. I'm not an expert on this stuff, so it could just be that we have better prevention systems in place now. But there's also this sense I get that the stuff, all the kindling that was available has finally been burned away. And
so you
we
just
got
have
a really good wet winter, and you can kind of measure. We were in a drought situation for a long time, so all the public fountains have been switched off, and I noticed they're back on again. So if that's a measure of anything, with the public fountains are on.
Yeah, you can't be too bad if there's a fountain around the corner. What if you're just wasting water because everyone is designed to see the fountains and see, oh, we're doing well now, but really you're just using the last little bit of it in order to marshal some public courage together before the real water wars start.
Right. I immediately thought of Versailles. Right, the king has been killed. They turn the fountains off. It's the first thing that happens.
Ah, I see.
That something has changed when the fountains turn off.
Yeah, I have always questioned the public utility of fountains. I don't get what's so entertaining about them. Maybe when I was a child, I liked them. I was dazzled by the dancing water. But excuse me. But
sounded
as
like
an
you were
adult,
drowning.
Yeah, I'm drowning in my own phlegm. If they made a phlegm fountain, that would be amazing. I would be impressed by that fountain. But what's the last fountain you went to that you were really like, wow, this is a crazy good fountain?
Well, my answer is going to probably be a little utilitarian, because there's a fountain. There's a place. I grew up in a place called Concord, which is like a very hot concrete suburban sort of place. Mm-hmm. But one town over from us was a place called Walnut Creek, which was really upscale, and they had a really fancy shopping center. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of this shopping center was a fountain that I noticed as a kid was always absolutely filled with quarters.
Wow, not even pennies,
coins or whatever. Not pennies, quarters, half dollars.
Jesus Christ, they're rich people wishes.
Yes, they were. So when I was a teenager, a friend of mine and I went down there and started cleaning the fountain out. Oh
yeah, as you would. It's not worth it for pennies, but 4 quarters, that's $1. You go get a candy bar at the rich people mall.
I remember all around the edge of the fountain, it was like a big circular, concrete bowl. Mm-hmm. And I had all of these coins stacked all around the edge of the fountain. It was like tens, if not hundreds of dollars. And right as we were starting to scoop the loot into whatever containers we had, mm-hmm. The security guard rolled up in his golf cart and chased us out of there.
In his golf cart. It's a rich people mall because the security guards have golf carts as well.
Yeah, this was before Segways.
Yeah, before Paul Blart really changed the mall security guard game. Before Blart, nobody knew that you could use these vehicles, but not anymore.
That was definitely the tantalizing thing to me about fountains as a kid, was the fact that people were throwing money into them.
Yeah, I used to throw pennies. Where does that fucking come from? What a weird human ritual.
Yeah, pennies are okay, but the quarters, it hurt.
Yeah, you are literally wasting a fairly substantial amount of money on nothing.
Yeah, when I was, yeah, right, exactly. A phone call back then was a quarter. The bus was 50 cents.
Yeah, a quarter's made a difference in your life. Yeah,
it definitely did. I grew up, again, the Concord was kind of like the poor relation of Walnut Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there were definitely mornings where my mom and I were like turning the cushions of the couch out so that we could try and find bus change. So yeah, that was probably why the money going into the fountain was so monumental in my childhood.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I remember doing that. I remember searching couch cushions for bus change as well. But yeah, I had the only fountains I had access to were the penny fountains, bullshit fountains. I'm not gonna troll around at the bottom of those fountains looking for that shit.
Were those Canadian pennies?
They were so worth even less, 0.73% of an American penny. Bullshit. I actually I love your cartoon style, and it's very loose and sort of it has like a Thurberish quality. I would say
I've heard that before.
Yeah. But it's more Thurberish was not like he was not like you have a more technical skill than Thurber, which comes out in your composition and the way that you like draw bodies as well.
Yeah, I wasn't really into art as a kid. And I didn't, my training. So my training is this: when I was 25, I had a girlfriend at the time who was she was leaving town. And she said, I wasn't doing anything with my life, so I wanted to go along. She said, I'm only going to let you follow me if you like do something with yourself, like go to school. So I enrolled in an art school because it was the only thing that I thought I could get into.
Okay. Yeah.
And like every other place wanted like academic records, and this place just wanted a portfolio. But I'd never drawn anything in my life, so I just grabbed I just started looking at like art books on the shelf of like a bookstore, and one of the things that popped out at me was the prints of Edvard Munch.
Edvard Munch, so the Norwegian, Swedish, Norwegian.
Yeah, Norwegian. He's mostly known as a Norwegian painter, but the Scream is his most famous work. But he also did these prints, woodcuts, and etchings and things like that. And they have the same kind of atmospheric, dark, angsty quality that would have spoken to a 25-year-old. And so I kind of just cribbed his style, drew some random things, and then sent them to this art school, and they let me in.
Hell yeah!
I probably could have done anything, and they would have let me in. I could have sent them blank pages, and they would have let me in.
Well,
But so yeah, and then suddenly I was taking like what they call foundation art, like life drawing and sculpture, and learning about form and volume and all that stuff. But this was all on a loan.
Yeah.
So after one semester, I saw the statement and immediately dropped out.
But you had learned the foundations by then.
I already had what I needed. And actually, I got a really, really, in retrospect, wonderful piece of advice from one of the drawing instructors there, who said, look, if this is really what you want to do with your life, all that matters is the portfolio. The BFA isn't going to mean anything. And I took that to heart. So I figured it's okay if I drop out now, because I'm still, it hadn't turned into a gigantic debt that was going to follow me for the rest of my life at that point. So having been 20, I was 25, I'd never drawn anything before. Suddenly I had this crash course, and had to find my own way. So
that's very interesting. There was never any inkling of like artistic ability before that, or like you weren't, did you like look at cartoons when you were a kid, or you had anything like that?
Well, when I was really little, like maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I think I drew in class a couple times and got in trouble, and I kind of just learned that this isn't something you're supposed to do, so I gave it up. But yeah, I probably Warner Brothers cartoons, The Simpsons, or whatever, just the stuff that is almost unavoidable. You're definitely going to encounter this stuff. But I don't know if I was ever analyzing it for form. Now, when I look at art, it's impossible not to immediately start dissecting it.
Oh yeah.
Which is funny because but at least, I feel like I had this, kind of a half a lifetime of just encountering art as something that I didn't really understand. And so it was in some ways more visceral.
Yeah.
I was able to develop an emotional relationship with images that didn't get bogged down by technical questions or, now I'm plagued. I spend every day worrying that I'm using the wrong pen.
Yeah, well, I think that's the sort of like the revelation of somebody like Matisse or like eventually, or the punks eventually, is that a practiced amateurishness in art is just as good, if not more compelling than expertise. But eventually, if you start doing practiced amateurishness enough, you start, getting bored with it. So you want to become more technically expert or something like that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that for sure. Although, so the artists I most admire, it's true that sometimes, later in their careers, they become more involved with the technical aspect of their work, and I just don't find it as moving.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this wasn't by design, but I think if there's an amateurish quality to my stuff still, it's the result of the work I do, like the not artistic work I do. The fact that most of what I do is very physical and exhausting. And so, in a way, I'm constantly undermining whatever fine motor skills I might be developing.
Yeah.
With the physical work. So, I don't know if that's a happy accident or what, but unfortunately, the thing I'm grappling with right now is not so much a matter of style or form, but just a sense that I've kind of said everything I've had to say or have to say.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it's funny how this works though, because you think you're saying something, and then you might go back and look at it later and you realize that you didn't really successfully communicate what it was that was on your mind. And so I feel like I've spilled a ton of ink trying to say something and I haven't really said it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like there's sort of like an iterative quality to it where I was like, it's like David Lynch's movies. You've seen the progression of David Lynch's movies. A lot of his movies are like the same thing. He keeps iterating on the same idea, like Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive and, the Twin Peaks, they all have these themes of like innocence being met with this horrible underbelly of humanity. And it really is the same idea over and over again, but subtly different in each way. And I think that's sort of like one of the best ways to approach it. Is because, of course, you're going to repeat yourself. Of course, there's like a limited amount of things in your head that you can say or that are unique to your sensibility. But I think, the effort of trying to express that better is sort of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's also just a certain amount of built-in change. You're changing physically, your circumstances are changing, your environment is changing, and so it's all of that is going to be reflected in one way or another. So it's inevitable. Yeah, I mean, the short version of the short version of the solution I'm looking for is really to just keep doing it. Whatever dissatisfaction or frustration I'm feeling will work itself out as long as I keep moving forward. But but at the same time, there is this, I'm not sure what it is exactly, but there's a feeling right now that maybe there's a new way to say what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, to need to change that sense of discomfort is necessary in change, though. I am reminded of an old adage by a rabbi who said, consider the lobster. The lobster molts. And during this molting, he is very uncomfortable. But that is what is necessary in order for you to grow and change and to develop a new shell. And eventually that one will molt as well. But no,
That's
I'm
great.
very much with you because I'm I did 1,000 penis comics in 1 year, and now the penis comics well has run dry. I'm like, how can I make this? What else can a penis be? I don't know anymore. I'm reaching for this stuff now, which is why the volume of dick jokes in my comics has gone down by a considerable amount. Now I'm making jokes about pop culture and relationships and stuff because there is a certain amount of just naturally you're going to repeat yourself over the course of a certain time in your artistic life, and getting bored with that repetition is inevitable. So you need to find some way to change it up.
I've never drawn any dicks.
Maybe.
And maybe I need to take your torch.
Yeah, maybe the dick torch. Yeah. Pass it on.
Almost everything I draw, it's framed around the upper. It's from the head down to maybe the nipples.
Yeah.
And so I just need to change the camera frame.
Yeah.
Now it's just gonna be abdomens, torsos.
yeah. No heads. Just talking abdomens. Space. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is something to that because so much of drawings or cartoons, especially comics where there's usually a speech bubble or text involved, it is very face or head centric. There's a lot of attention. I forget the guy who made the Triplets of Belleville, the animated movie.
Oh yeah, I don't know his name either, but it's probably French.
Yeah, he's definitely French. But he had the reason why he wanted no dialogue in that movie was because he was animation's usually very obsessed about the mouth, and it's a lot of mouth movements to the detriment of having full-bodied figures, sort of interact and communicate through visual language in that way, which is why that movie has no dialogue. Also, having no dialogue helps it translate better to other markets as well.
Yeah, that's a well, I don't know if I should say it was a mistake, but the last book I did, the reviews or criticism that I saw about it said that it was strongest when I eliminated text altogether. And I was just when I was focusing on pantomime. So there were the panels with full body expression, where there's a lot of action and no need to explain it.
I think that's a big struggle in cartooning, though, because sometimes, you want to go with that film idea of show, don't tell. But the thing about it is, the thing that's unique about comics and cartoons is it's text and pictures. So if there isn't some text element, you are only really using half the medium or half what it's good for.
I agree. Yeah. I've long toyed with the idea of doing something that's utterly wordless, and it just, I always end up thinking there's no way this is really going to do what I wanted it to, even if it's, I don't know. I could have the most insane gymnastics going on. That doesn't really, there are some ideas that can't be performed in interpretive dance,
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Well, also because, your stuff is very grounded in reality and experience. And you focus a lot on biography, too. I noticed that you're very interested in the lives of others, or how you had that whole interview series where you're interviewing different cartoonists and, finding out about there's what is because I don't have any interest in other people. I don't want to know about the lives of people. What drives you to understand the history of individuals in this way?
I don't know. The first thought I had when you were mentioning this is that it feels in a way like I've whittled down to what is essential for me with these interview comics, because they're practically the only thing I can draw anymore.
Yeah.
I've kind of for whatever reason, I run out of juice on anything else I was doing, but I can still get those out, and it's still become kind of a struggle, but because I have a regular gig now with a venue, there's that extra little kick in the pants that I need every month to get more material out. But I don't know. It's somehow trying to make. I just don't have the words for it.
I think it's, I think it's worth exploring, because before we started recording, you were talking about all the World War I guys. You were sort of obsessed with the World War I guys. And back in like 2011, when they were all dying, and like living history was being, like living memory was being erased before your eyes. And so you were actually able to name the specific name of the last WW1 vet that died, which I was impressed by. What was it? Lewis Allington, you said?
Henry Allingham.
Henry Allingham, yeah.
Yeah. Born 1896, died 1911, or died 2011. Anyway, maybe I've always enjoyed interviews, and not conducting them, but reading them. They've always it's something that feels very natural. When you speak a sentence, it has a certain flow that you don't necessarily get with writing, strictly speaking.
Is it?
But
this,
maybe,
yeah. No, you continue.
Also, my relationship with creating stuff is also very intuitive. I'm not a big planner.
Yeah.
And a lot of times an idea grows out of something that was an accident. And so there's a lot of unpredictability when you're having a discussion with someone. So that it kind of, it's an organic structure that's very much reactive.
Yeah.
And so it's very comfortable for me, because I'm working with something that someone has handed me. I'm reacting to it instead of having to just generate ideas out of nothing. But I know that's kind of selling short other ways of creating, though, because everyone is obviously reacting to something that's happening around them. But maybe some of it is just it gets down to motivation, and
yeah,
trying to reach out and connect with other people. And so, there's there's this old trope that every writer is writing for a particular person, because you can't write to the public. The writing to the public it's not cohesive.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't know who that one person is, and you're deep in your psyche, somewhere is that audience member of one that you're addressing. And it's easier if I know exactly who it is I'm talking to.
yeah, I get that. But that sort of like, because, art, or what makes art good, is specificity. There's something unique. There is a quality to this which cannot be easily replicated by somebody else, or is distinctive or idiosyncratic to whoever is producing it. And that sort of interview format, you're given an automatic window into idiosyncrasy, because if you just ask anybody 3 questions, you'll find, wow, there's a whole world in you. There's a whole fucking universe in you. And, some crazy shit happened to you that I don't even know about before, but now you're telling it to me.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
The certain lack of control is important, I think. Yeah.
Is it also that, like, people are repositories of living history as well, which makes it interesting?
Yep. Yeah, that's another long-time obsession of mine is field recordings of music.
Yeah.
Alan Lomax, stuff like that. Or going back further, like the composer Béla Bartók.
Love Bartók.
He was a folklorist going into the countryside with his little hand-cranked cylinder recorder.
Yeah.
To get down all those gypsy tunes. And I don't know. There's this struggle to try and preserve something before it's completely wiped.
Yeah, the famous adage from the video game, "Everything not saved will be lost," which translated. But it's something that I talk about a lot on this show, because we've been talking about media preservation a lot, because now we were promised in the digital age that media will be on here forever. Once it's on the internet, it's completely sealed and locked in time, and there's nothing you can do to get rid of it. But now we see all these dead links, like all of this digital media. Translating everything to digital media instead of physical media means that way more stuff is being lost to time now, because there is no physical version of it.
Yeah, as a longtime freelancer, we used to rack up a lot of bylines, and now, yeah, I go back and I just think it's probably more than half of it is just it's been scraped.
Yeah.
And there might be a box of originals somewhere, but they are deep, deep, deep under a heap of something else.
Yeah.
I feel it's got to be I need to write a will, because I don't want my kids to feel any guilt around throwing all of that stuff away.
You can throw the original. I'm sure they want to keep them. I'm sure.
But,
I wanted, because so you've written comics for the New Yorker, which I find that very interesting, because like that you weren't like a kid who was reading New York, because I was like one of those stupid weird kids that was reading New Yorker comics when I was like 12 years old, and like thinking, aha, I am the pinnacle of sophistication by reading these cartoons. I don't understand most of them. They're about like lots of people are on therapist couches, but this is what comedy is, apparently. So I'm really enjoying them. I guess also like my intro to them was a guy who's sort of atypical for the New Yorker, but who is in it. Gan Wilson is one of my biggest influences. I loved his stuff. And it's very easy for a kid to get to, because, kids like gross or like weird stuff. And,
oh, yeah, for sure.
I was very much into the horror aspect of his comics when I was a kid. And that got me into the broader New Yorker universe. How did you like make that discovery, like after you went to art school, or like how did you get into like New Yorker stuff?
Everything is messed up because the New Yorker wasn't something I was really super conscious of as a kid, but my dream when I was younger was to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the New Yorker just was in my head as a goalpost. And so, when I started drawing and thinking about, well, if this is the thing I'm going to be doing creatively, where should I take it? I just took it to all the places that had already been in my head with writing. But now suddenly, in a way, what makes it easier as a cartoonist than a writer is that you get immediate reactions. Like, people can look at your stuff and process it immediately. And in the context of showing it to an editor, that's much more satisfying, because the struggle that I saw the writers going through is that they would, they would sweat and bleed over 10,000 words or whatever, and then send these like short stories off to places, and it would take months and months before they even got any kind of reply. And it just seemed like that's not sustainable. That's insane that you would be doing that.
Yeah. So the anticipation, just living with that bated breath for months at a time would be bad for my heart.
Oh, awful. So, but with cartoons, I mean, even at the New Yorker, they have that weekly vetting session where people just sit in the office and have their work eviscerated, but at least they're getting immediate replies.
Mm-hmm.
So the turnover was faster, and I'm not patient.
Yeah,
so it definitely spoke to me. But yeah, so the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Harper's, all those were very deliberate goalposts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a matter of figuring out who had the decision-making power at these places, like going through the masthead and trying to harass people, but not too much.
Remnick, showing up in David Remnick's toilet. It's like, hey, would you like my cartoons? Crashing Francois Mouly's kid's bar mitzvah or whatever.
Yeah, but I've reached a point now where I think a lot of that motivation of trying to get those big names, obviously there's ego, and that's also a sense of inadequacy, because I never did actually go to college except for a semester of art school, and so I kind of felt like a fuck up. And so it was a way of like asserting some kind of validate, or finding some kind of validation, or asserting my competency. But I guess I'm at a point now where I don't feel that fire anymore.
Yeah. Well, you have less to prove now that you've actually been established.
That's probably a big part of it.
Yeah.
But I've also my faith in those things has also diminished quite a bit.
Your faith in like big institutional publications?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because does seem like in some sense everything has been reordered. When I started doing this stuff, it was like the late 2000s, and it actually weirdly corresponded with the big crash in 2008.
Okay, yeah.
It was like maybe maybe the worst time and you could possibly pick to try and start making a career out of something like this.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I was going to, at that time I was in college for music, so I know what you mean. Yeah.
So yeah, but so my experience was going to all of these places as the cracks were appearing, and yeah, I guess I got to there. So yeah, there was this point where these two different feelings met. One was that I no longer had anything to prove, but secondly, that I'd also actually been disillusioned, or that whatever I thought these legacy places represented no longer had the same meaning or value to me. So now I don't know. I posted recently that I'd submitted to something to the New Yorker 5 years ago, and they just accepted it.
That's so funny. Yeah, you were worried about being a writer and having delayed acceptance times or delayed criticism times, but it still happens.
I don't know. I can't account for it either, because that's actually, that 5 years ago is about the time that I decided I wasn't going to try anymore. So it's like it feels a little dysfunctional. Like they were waiting for me to do something else, and because I didn't do it, they were like just gonna just dig their heels in and somehow demonstrate that I needed to come crawling back to them, and it never happened. And so they're like, but wait. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you gotta, what about these publications seem dysfunctional now? Is it that there's just, magazines don't really exist anymore and they're like living ghosts in this world of digital media?
Oh, I guess it's probably more like seeing closely enough the real power dynamics behind it, that it's not, there's all this grumbling about meritocracy, and there was never a meritocracy at these places. It was always, obviously there's a certain amount of skill and ability you have to have, but the selection process is so nepotistic, and there's so much. I don't want to use this word wrong, but incorrectly. But there's politics. I'm not talking about like ideological politics, but just the office politics of these places. Yeah. It just. I don't know. It's probably just familiarity breeds contempt, but
yeah. Well, I also think there's certain, like when you're an artist too, especially when you're naturally more idealistic when you're younger. I think you have this idea that other artists, because they have these high-minded faculties, because they have, the maybe the same motivations as you to express something and get down to the core of the human soul. You have this imagination, this imagined image of them as being more egalitarian or being more fair or having a greater sense of equity or being secret commies or something like that. But no, nobody's secret commie. They're still at this capitalist institution, and they're still plagued by all the pitfalls of, I guess nepotism is not unique to capitalism, but
no, of course not. It's not even upset if you're talking about someone's zine where it's them and their three friends. I'm not going to go, oh, nepotism. How come I'm not in your zine? But I guess it is. Yeah, part of it is that this is a giant bullseye, right? New Yorker is a giant bullseye, and so you're going to have every conniving, unscrupuled, ambitious climber trying to break into it, and so it's. I think maybe almost by definition, it's just going to be kind of, I don't know, vicious.
Yeah, we come back to capitalism because it's that It's that sense of competition. There's whether you want it or not, you're always competing against these people for a limited amount of space in these big publications.
Right.
And that sort of takes the wind out of your sails a little, because it's like, shouldn't there be a world where we're all supporting each other, or there's sort of like a more variety of people that you publish, but I guess, once you make friends with the editor and you're good friends with the editor, that's it. You're in, and you can get whatever you want in there. And they have this sort of, there's only enough money to go around to support like a few cartoonists doing their venture exclusively. So they figure they might as well do that instead of support hundreds of cartoonists in a piecemeal sort of manner.
Right. Yeah. And some of it I realize is probably just an inability to really accept or adapt to what's really in front of me, because there's this other idea I had in my head for a long time. There was once upon a time, every city had, 2 or 3 newspapers, and those newspapers were had whole staffs of cartoonists.
Yeah.
And they all had different jobs at the paper, but they all involved like some form of illustration throughout the pages.
Yeah.
And so there'd be someone whose job was just to take the financial columns and put little filigrees in there or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, that, in a weird way, that was kind of deep down the kind of thing I wanted for myself, was to just be a full-time cartoonist interacting with the public in some way, not necessarily colossal, but just having a relationship.
Well, did you see Zodiac?
Yes.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal is a cartoonist in that, who is also trying to solve the Zodiac murder. But I want his job. That would be my dream job. Are you kidding me? Being like an editorial guy at a newspaper, that would be incredible.
I tried really hard to get in touch with Robert Graysmith, the actual cartoonist.
Yeah.
I wanted to interview him.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work out.
Well.
So the other guy that I established contact with him, but then he bailed. A cartoonist named Dan O'Neill. He had a comic strip in the Chronicle during the Zodiac years called Odd Bodkins.
I think I know Odd Bodkins, actually.
It's actually pretty cool for what it is and what he did. And at the time he was doing it, he's considered one of the kind of proto underground cartoonists.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the one with a real job, because he was actually at the Chronicle while all of his cohort were doing underground press or whatever.
Yeah.
He's in his 80s now, and he lives in the hills. And I managed to get one email reply from him, and then he ghosted me. And it might not have even been on purpose. So
yeah, he probably isn't a big email guy. I don't think R. Crumb is a big email guy. I don't think Gilbert Shelton is a big email guy, but yeah.
But I really wanted to get in touch with that world at one point. Especially, my family background. My family's been in California for a long time. And my dad was a total acid head in San Francisco in the 60s.
Hell yeah.
So I don't know. It was in a way, and he died in 2007, and I didn't really know him growing up.
I see.
I tracked him down as an adult, actually, and just a few years later, he died.
That's an interesting story. What happened? Was there this desire to seek your dad out?
Yeah. I was trying to think of a good way to summarize it. Basically, when my mom found out she was pregnant, she kind of decided she didn't want him involved in my life, which kind of made sense.
Well, he was a big acid head, I guess.
Right, exactly. So, it definitely might account for some of the scrambling in my DNA, but she split. He didn't even know he had a kid.
I see.
And then as I was reaching adulthood, I suddenly had the faculties and the mental equipment, basically, to try and figure out where he went or where he was.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I was growing up with the World Wide Web, so as it became more sophisticated and more data was being dumped into it, it finally got to a point where I was able to track him down using the internet, which wouldn't have been possible when I was like 12.
Yeah, you would have to do some like real gumshoe work. You'd have to like tap a phone line or something like that.
I'd look people up with his last name in the phone book and randomly call, hoping for a lead.
What was that like when you first met him?
Well, I only ever met him over the phone because he was living in a rural town in Nebraska.
Oh.
And at the time I was actually living in South Carolina, so it was just, and I didn't have the resources to go, hop on a plane or whatever. So it was just a few conversations, and it was clear that the effects of his drug career were still, my understanding is he was clean when I found him, but he was already like, on another planet in a way. We had a couple awkward, strange conversations over the phone, and there was definitely on his part, there were a lot of tangents and stuff that just came out of nowhere. But I was also fascinated and intrigued, even though I could kind of tell that we weren't ever going to form like a real relationship.
Yeah.
I think there was still this yearning to try and like flesh out his identity and understand who he was and where he came from. Mm-hmm. And because he had been part of that universe of the Summer of Love in San Francisco and all that stuff, it's something that I still, I always take extra notice when I encounter things from that era.
Yeah.
Or people from that era for that matter, especially since they're all reaching their 80s, and it's, that's going to talk about waves of dying memories.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the next generation that's going to cease to be a living memory soon.
Yeah, all of the hippies, they're all of the real hippies, not this Burning Man, wealthy tech hippie thing that we've got going on nowadays, but the real dropout, turn on, tune out. What was that guy's name? I can't even remember.
Oh, Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary. I was going to call him Dennis Leary for a second. Timothy Leary going, I'm an asshole, I'm an asshole, I'm an.
Oh God.
See, that's very interesting because I understand the desire to know your parents better. But for me, it comes from this place where when you grow up, you realize just how much of your personality is as a result of your parents' influence. Especially if you grow up with them when you're younger, you realize that, all of my mannerisms and, my interests can be reduced to the time my mom showed me this one thing. I mean, my mom is the one who introduced me to Gan Wilson. She gave me Gan Wilson books when I was a kid. But it's interesting when you have a parent who you didn't know, and who, did you see, any similarities between you and him, like that you just picked up genetically, and that it was like a big revelatory moment for it?
Definitely. Very similar personalities. Because he has a lot of siblings, and so I was able to, who were able to have coherent conversations. So in talking to them, I learned a little bit more about him, and the more I learned, the more I felt like somehow he was still, the way that I can really get to know him is to just keep looking inward, because we had so many of the same characteristics. Even stuff that it's probably just a coincidence, but at the time that I tracked him down, I was already also really heavily into like hot jazz from the 1920s and early 30s, and when I did find him, I learned that he had a huge collection of old 78s from that era.
Yeah.
It's so strange. It's not like there was like a lot of there wasn't peer pressure that led me to get into 1920s jazz.
Yeah, everywhere, all the kids at school were listening to Louis Armstrong, and they were smoking cigarettes. They were smoking jazz cigarettes and being like, "Hey, loser, we're listening to hot jazz." Fucking asshole.
Usually, what would happen is I'd have like a Bix Beiderbecke record or whatever, and I'd put it on for my friends. You got to check this out, and it would be like, the
garbly, the cylinders,
and people just couldn't believe that I could sit through that. There's low fidelity, Anyway,
Well, I love hot jazz, especially like those early, like really scratchy sounding recordings, because it was almost like it was you know how there was the Hays Code in movies, so all like the pre-code movies were sort of like filthy and fucked up, and then the Hays Code came in and changed it. But it was sort of like that with jazz music too, like because hot jazz, it originated in brothels. You know, it's like there's
way
an
more
argument.
innuendo.
Yeah.
And it's all acoustic recording. They didn't have electricity, so it's literally just the vibrations from the instruments hitting this like tiny disc.
Yeah,
that's bumping the needle into the wax.
Yeah,
it's kind of bonkers to think that what you're listening to is basically just the sound waves.
Yeah,
it's in a way that I don't know. Yeah, it does feel there's something carnal about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about living. Yeah, it's a much more alive piece of technology than say a piece of digital technology. There is like a much more of a physical aspect to it.
Yeah. But yeah, so like weird things like that just made me. It did. Yeah, it's you're thinking about nature versus nurture, and it definitely recalibrated my understanding of where the ratio might be.
Yeah, it's a little more nature than you want to admit or comfortable with. Well, yeah, I mean, it's also because like your parents are inevitably so different from you, but you will latch on to like details about them that sort of, because your identity is forever a negotiation with yourself. What am I? You're always asking that question throughout your life. It's very difficult to answer. So you're looking for something in your parents, or you're looking for something external, because people externally, they seem to be these fixed entities, or they seem to be these entities that, don't have this same type of identity crisis, even though they do, but they seem like they have, their traits are more fixed. So I think, that's why you sort of like look to your parents for examples of that.
Yeah, this is also, maybe this is related, that I'm always trying to understand the behavior of other people and probably dissecting their actions way more than they are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like I have this like conviction that there's something really deep and nuanced behind what they're doing, and it's probably it's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
If that might relate to the impulse to interview.
Well, I think that there is, even in the simplest actions, there is something deep and nuanced about it, because everyone is subject to these hidden motivations that they don't even know they have, so
right.
Anytime you like a decision to go to the store and buy groceries at a particular time is motivated by this impossibly complicated confluence of factors. So I think that is, I don't know if you like have self-diagnosed neurodivergence either, because everyone on the internet says, I've never taken a test and I think I'm autistic. I don't like loud noises at parties, and I definitely do that. I take like the do I have autism test a lot, because I'm sort of concerned. Part of it is like maybe I want this medical intervention or something, but the other part of it is like, oh, this would finally explain what's wrong with me.
Yeah, I'm kind of, well, probably because it's constantly being framed to me as an accusation.
Yeah,
I'm resistant to any diagnosis.
Yeah.
So yeah, my wife is always telling me that I have ADHD.
Yeah,
and you need to get tested. And I said, and I'll say, even if I do, there's nothing that can be done about it. I'm not going to take drugs.
Not going to take Adderall. You're not going to take the the speed.
Yeah, and that some of that is maybe just personal experience. I had friends growing up who would, be given the wrong thing and then start doing crazy stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so I guess in that way, I'm at a point in my life where I can't afford to be experimenting with the right description.
Yeah. If you got a kid, that shit's right out. Yeah.
So I for a while I was seeing a therapist who was helping me just like kind of build the habits that one needs when one struggles with certain kinds of things like remembering or focusing. But no proper diagnosis, and maybe not a lot of time really thinking about it or worrying about it. But that might be that might be a symptom.
Yeah. The scrutinizing of other people's act, because there is like, I think just to want to be a cartoonist, you're already on the outside of the motivations of a lot of people. You're already, feel like you're on the window on the outside looking in. Like, what normal people want? Who are these people that are in these, who becomes like a middle manager at Intel? What are these normal motivations that people have? How do they come by them? So because I've
really
always felt, I don't have these normal motivations, but if I dissect someone's body language well enough, I can maybe determine why they come to be the way they are.
Yeah, it's something I didn't think about at all, really, until I suddenly was in situations so I've got 2 kids, so I'm around all of these parents, and it's really hard to relate to a lot of them because they have lifestyles that just seem so alien to me.
Yeah,
I do have the sense that the lifestyle decisions they make, it's a reflection of their values, and they're things that don't really matter to me necessarily. And I new car, or for that matter, even clean car. Who cares?
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued by that stuff. Like,
yeah, or like keeping up.
Why do you need this car? Why do you need this new car? And why are you so meticulous about its condition? And it just seems so irrelevant to me, completely irrelevant. I don't know what purpose it serves.
Yeah,
maybe that's a failure on my part.
No, I think that I think you are like me, and part maybe the reason why we share sort of simplistic cartoon styles, or cartoon styles that can be done in sort of a quick amount of time, is maybe one is the ADHD, but 2 is that sense of impermanence, that sense of, this can all just be discarded as soon as, like a Buddhist mandala. Like, the point is you make it and then you blow the sand away at the end of it, because everything is impermanent. So why focus on these material things or these examples of material wealth, because it's all gonna die eventually. Focus on something more important.
I think you're right. Most of my work is on Post-it notes. So the panels are I have the option of moving panels around if I need to or whatever. But it's not good paper.
Yeah.
Obviously, the glue holding those Post-it notes to the paper is wearing off. So I've got boxes that are just like loose little scraps of paper that are all jumbled together, and there's no rhyme or reason to it anymore.
Yeah.
Really. But yeah, this is because I guess I've never thought of this work as something that needs to be archived, or that needs to be on a canvas or mounted, or that people. Yeah, it almost seems like. I mean, I guess my orientation has always been towards publication too. So I think like what really matters is how it looks on the printed page. But the things that people spend so much time doing that don't, well, I mean, maybe all of it's meaningless. I was going to say, like, why are you cleaning your car? And they're going to say, well, why are you drawing a picture?
Yeah. But one's, I guess the other side of it, beyond the like mandala thing, or beyond the sense of impermanence, is conversely a sense of permanence. It's like, I think there is always like an ego-driven aspect to art, which is like, okay, so how do I live beyond myself? If I get something published or something is in like a work of note, then I will live after I die, because I'm frightened of death. I don't want to die. I like my ego. I like being an individual person with my own sets of thoughts and feelings, right? So maybe there is some way to preserve myself. So that is an aspect of it too, that sort of selfish desire for a type of immortality.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. which is like, why are you focusing on your car? You're not going to become immortal from your car.
Yeah, even the newness of it suggests to me that, in a few years it's going to be long gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of this is tied up with I'm not strictly speaking all that confident in the idea of free will.
Yeah.
And that seems to be more controversial than I realized.
No, I'm with you. I'm totally anti-free. I don't think free will really exists either. I mean, it does like for we are creatures of free will, right? We understand our minds we experience it, but it doesn't really exist in my view.
No, we're a floppy disk.
Yeah.
So we can't possibly, contain the processor. But yeah, so that even this idea of impermanence, it does feel sometimes like any moment, in a way, because by its very impermanence is also permanent. That it's part of the infinite fabric.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, talking about it as something that will last or not last, it just almost seems irrelevant. I don't know.
Well, if I don't know if I've ever explained my metaphysical, the bullshit metaphysics that I subscribe to, but I've always been a strong believer in the time is a flat circle thing, where it's just, which some people consider the worst hell of all. The idea that we just repeat our lives and there's nothing we can do about it. And there will be no change or differentiation to the repetition. It's just the same thing over and over and over again. But while some people think that's like, oh, that's fatalistic and there's nothing I can do to change my future. Conversely, I became much more free will oriented after I made this discovery for myself, or I started telling myself this, because it's like, well, if I have to do this all over again, I might as well try and pursue something that is pleasurable to me, or I might as well try and pursue something that is more fulfilling than, I mean, that's sort of why I started doing cartoons, is because I was like locked in these jobs that I wasn't getting a lot of, spiritual definition out of. I wasn't getting like a lot of sense of purpose or sense of individuality out of them. So I figured, like, I'm going to have to do this all over again. I'm fated to do this all over again, so I need to change my life very quickly and start doing something that is more spiritually fulfilling.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how I come by that fatalism, or how do you come by your fatalism, or what was like an experience that taught you that we're just a series of switches,
I guess it's the only possible logical conclusion that I can come to every time I try and work it out. Every time I think about the materiality, even of thoughts, and that the observable phenomenon do behave according to certain immutable laws, and I think where that seeming immutability only really breaks down on a level at which we don't actually have complete data. So as far as I can tell, there isn't any authentic randomness. And if there is no authentic randomness, then there can't be any authentic free will, which is predicated on choice. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember. I've been chewing on this for so long that it's kind of hard to remember the exact order of the evolution of this feeling. But where I'm at with it now is almost like a transcendent understanding of it, because almost the idea that will and agency aren't things that are adequate as signifiers. That you have math. You can do a mathematical equation that points to infinity, but that will never encapsulate infinity. And so the will and agency are things that they seem almost like distractions.
Yeah, well, I think a better word for them, or like a word that I would use to describe it, is desire. More than anything else, it is this unconscious motivation that we have that comes from somewhere, but it is not as a result of some random occurrence in our brain or some like choice we have. Are you heartened at all by like the revelations of quantum physics that stuff can exist in two states at the same time until it is observed? That sort of points to the idea that our universe is less locked in a certain pattern, or does that just make you even more entrenched in your idea that things are really fixed and there's nothing we can do about it?
Yeah, I think I mean this is going to be, it's laughable for me to even speculate, having absolutely no training in physics or understand these things on a very deep level. But my sense is that in the domain of quantum mechanics, what we're looking at is incomplete data. And if there is a situation where things are only fixed once they're observed, that either means that there's something missing from our measuring system, or there's it could indicate just a deeper and more dynamic immutable structure.
Yeah,
that we're because it's also kind of crazy for us to try and like we're just these gnats.
Yeah.
Trying to understand something so just impossibly vast. But yeah, my hunch is that quantum mechanics is not the solution.
Quantum mechanics is not the solution. It created the A-bomb and it will create more.
But the A-bomb does things that that don't defy our understanding of physics, the physical law.
Well, it's also sorry, keep going.
It doesn't break the law.
Yeah.
If we can create quantum bombs that just do random shit that we can't predict, then I might change my feelings about this. But it's a fun idea, though. The idea that you could drop a bomb on something and it turns into a turtle.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the popularity of that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because it sort of posits. It's all right. I got into trouble for saying it's kind of like it's a little trite. People didn't like when I said it's like kind of trite, but it's good. It's an accomplished movie. It's decent. I think it deserved its accolades, but it's very sappy. Very self-consciously sappy.
But it has to be as a movie, right?
Yeah.
If it's going to do well.
Got to have that ending. Got to have that ending where people resolve, and the primacy of the family is restored, and it's fine. But I think it's also interesting with quantum mechanics is like, okay, so something exists in two states if it's unobserved, but in order to comprehend it, we have to observe it. So it never actually exists in those two states. In order for us to like even jot it down or to take down data, we will never actually experience the point at which it's in those two stages of matter.
It just feels like a fancy repackaging of the tree falls thing.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
Good old Zen Coens. They had it right. They had it correct.
Maybe that's the part of it is that if you're using a metric that's fundamentally illogical, it better expresses the perfect logic of the universe, because you can't, and if something that's infinite can't be encapsulated, and so the only way you can express the logic of infinity is by doing something illogical.
Yeah. I also like the idea that in math there's like different concepts of infinity. Like there are smaller versions of infinity. Do you know about the Aleph null set?
I don't, but this sounds like Zeno's paradox.
It's something that I only learned from Futurama because there was a joke in it about like a movie theater complex, that the Aleph Null movie theater complex. But Aleph Null is the smallest version of infinity because it's every integer. Every integer that you can think of is in the Aleph Null set. But there are larger versions of infinity which are like encapsulate numbers or concepts that aren't integers, or that there's a bigger, more encapsulating version of it, which I always found interesting, that there are smaller and larger versions of infinity in math.
Yeah. So I wonder if there are physical equivalents.
Yeah.
But when I say infinity, I guess I'm thinking literally the literal infinite nature of substance itself, of being, of existence.
Yeah.
But
zooming into an atom and zooming into a quark, and how you can never zoom in far enough. There is no terminal point.
Yeah. It's all tied together. But yeah, I just feel trite saying this stuff.
This is we're talking. Speaking of LA acid heads in the '60s, that's what they were talking. It's like the first. It's like in Animal House when Tom Hulse and Donald Sutherland are having the weed conversation. It's like, you're telling me there's a universe in this whole atom? Yeah, it's the first conversation you have on weed. Yeah.
Every time I talk about this stuff, I see Donald Sutherland in my head.
Yeah, and his nice ass, his great ass. He's got a great ass, Donald Sutherland. I think moving back from like the cosmic, the cosmic musings. I want to talk about. So 25 is like a very interesting age to pick this stuff up, because I started doing cartooning like seriously, or started doing it every day only like a year ago, but I had been doing it on and off my whole life, and had influences before then. Did you have artistic influences in cartooning before you started doing it, or did you only start like looking at the history of it seriously after you started doing it?
Yeah, I think it was concurrent. Like James Thurber, I don't think I knew really who that was. I wish I could ask myself at 25, who's James Thurber? I might have come up with some kind of answer, but I didn't really start looking at stuff like that until I was already determined to try and do it myself. But another one, and I don't know if the influence comes through, but I was really into Ronald Searle for a long time.
Oh, hell, Searle fucking rules. Yeah, I get it.
One thing about Searle is he just seems so technically accomplished, such a virtuoso, that it's at some point with him, and he was pretty prolific too, and I would try to collect as much stuff by him as I could. And at some point, I just felt like I'm never going to be that good, and having that realization was very liberating. So I could stop trying to be as good as Searle.
This is brilliant, unique. I wonder how much of Stedman was influenced by Searle, or were they contemporaries?
Has to be, because Searle's a bit older than Stedman. I think Stedman was born in 1936. Searle was born in 1919. So there's almost a generation of difference. But so definitely, like I know Searle's story is, he had started cartooning before the war. And you can see those early cartoons, the lines are very clean. Everything's very moderate and balanced. Then he's in the Japanese, and he's in the Japanese prisoner of war camp, sketching his, compatriots starving to death by using like shoe polish on like pieces of canvas or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, suddenly you've got those crazy tortured Searle lines.
Yeah.
And so this is, from the late 40s onward. I see Ralph Steadman as a schoolboy absorbing all of that. And he probably, I don't know, he may have acknowledged it directly, But my feeling is if he denies it, he's lying.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how like all of these illustrators, fucked up their cartoons really. Like the similar thing can be said about Otto Dix as well, where it's
Oh,
like
right.
a lot of his art or a lot of the fucked up quality of his art was as a direct result of World War One.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, George Grosz.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. All of these, yeah, scratchy post-war guys, getting real raw with it after they had seen. It's so funny. I've just come back from World War One. I've seen immense horrors. Time to do cartoons. I'm gonna do cartoons. But it worked, It's like, yeah, for listeners, look up Searle, look up Ronald Searle. He's one of the greats, and a name that people don't know is like as much as say, I don't know who's like a cartoonist that everyone can name from Al Hirschfield or someone like that.
Oh yeah, that's probably a good. That's a good analogy because there's that same like richness and skill,
Mm-hmm.
but he's all clean and Broadway
Yeah,
and
Hirschfield.
like,
There's not an evil quality. There's not like
no.
a dark, fucked up quality to Hirschfield drawings.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, both of them lived incredibly long lives.
Yeah.
Hirschfeld, I think he lived to like 101.
Oh yeah.
And Searle was in his late 90s. This is something I've noticed. It's not true for all cartoonists, but there are certain cartoonists who just seem to live forever. Jules Pfeiffer is still alive. He's in his 90s.
That's insane.
Like,
That's
and he's
crazy.
like going through this, like he's putting out like graphic novels now, which he'd never done when he was young. He was like a newspaper strip artist for a long time. And then like in his, like, as he was approaching 90, started putting out all these graphic novels.
That fucking rules.
It's super inspiring.
I love Jules
I feel
Pfeiffer.
like you can't tell yourself that you're over the hill if a 90-year-old is making graphic novels. You have no excuse.
Yeah, I think Will Eisner made Contract with God at like 72 or something like that, and that was like maybe I'm exaggerating that, but yeah, he was quite old when he did his first graphic novel. Of course, he was also yeah.
He didn't start doing children's books until he was in his 60s. Which is kind of mind blowing. He was like 84 when he wrote Shrek.
That's the Shrek book is much different than the movie. It's very different from the movie.
Yes, very different. But it's funny that's probably the mark he made on the culture. That's the largest mark he made on the culture in a way. Mm-hmm. But it's so unlike what he actually did.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe we're gonna get. I'm trying to think of like another illustrator who had some sort of iconic character that will get turned into a pop culture reference machine eventually.
Just wait until next year when Mickey Mouse becomes public domain.
I want to do so many fucking Mickey cartoons. I'm gonna do so many fucked up Mickey Mouse cartoons. I'm gonna do Mickey Mouse with his dick out. Gonna do Mickey Mouse, putting a curling iron on his dick and then it gets all curly. I'm gonna do Jewish Mickey Mouse to piss off. To piss off Walt Disney. I always liked that. I always thought Fievel Goes West. Okay, here's a Jewish mouse. Is this some sort of comment on Walt Disney in a way?
Oh, they ripped off.
They ripped off Mouse. There was a big contention between Spiegelman and Don Bluth, which is so funny. This guy does this horrifying mouse story about the Holocaust, and then a guy does like a very Disney-fied version of the mouse Holocaust.
Yeah. I like that for Disney, the Disney version of the Holocaust is the pogroms.
Yeah.
It's like Holocaust light.
Yes, we don't have to be not people don't know about this stuff. They don't really think about this stuff a lot. It's not fresh in our memory, so it's a little lighter for people to think about the pogroms, to think about the mouse pogroms.
It was more picturesque because there were hussars involved.
Yes.
Or Cossacks or whatever.
I guess there was also there is a weird American obsession. I guess obsession is the wrong word, but Fiddler on the Roof was hugely popular. There is something about these stories from the Pale of Settlement that are very, I don't know, very intriguing to people.
Yeah, the actor who played Tevye just died.
Yeah, Chaim Topol.
That's right. Yeah, it's very curious, isn't it? But I guess in a way, it's like it's for whatever reason, it's kind of taken as like the most authentic expression of a certain kind of Jewishness.
Yeah.
I love the anecdote about the mother with her son on the subway in Israel in the early years of the nation, and she's speaking Yiddish to her son, and another passenger says, "This is Israel. You speak Hebrew here," and she said, "I don't want my son to forget he's Jewish."
Take that, Israelis. I recently learned, I think from Twitter, that Fiddler on the Roof was huge in Japan. Like, it's like one of the longest running musicals in Japan. And instead of like Mazel Tov before they drink, they say Kanpai, which is great. But
it's hard not to think of it being like this weird sort of like plastic leather version of Fiddler on the Roof with like lots of smiley faces and
it's very true. It's true to the original show, because the reason why it was so popular in Japan is because it's like, this is the experience of a Japanese family. There's this father who is geared towards tradition, but all of his children are subtly defying them, and he has to, through love, learn to accept their decisions. You know, that's like it's like a story that apparently was very close to the Japanese familial identity, which is why it ran so long and people identified with it so much.
Where was Russia in the Boxer Rebellion?
I don't know.
Russo-Japanese relations going back a century now.
Yeah. That's also very funny. You guys were fucked over by Russia. We were fucked by Russia, you know? We get it. We know. It's also like, it's also the reason why Irish people and Palestinians are so, you hate the British, we hate the British. Oh my God. We have so much in common.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that sort of cross-cultural, when two cultures unexpectedly have more in common than you might think. I think we're coming near to the end of our hour here, Jason.
Excellent, because my lunch hour is going to end in 30 minutes ago.
Okay. Thank you so much for appearing on this podcast. I love your work. It's fucking great. It's so there's a gentleness to it that I love, and there's a sort of like an observational gentleness that I think is very, very hard to recreate. And that's
good to hear. That's good to hear, because I always feel like I'm being too edgy.
Really?
And then to hear that there's some gentleness, make this reassuring.
No, well, because it's like, I'm so bad at being genuinely interested in other people, but it's really, if you want one quality that will just improve your life vastly, it's being genuinely interested in other people. And I think that's what your cartoons really have, is this like actual care about the lives of others, which is really good.
I feel genuine interest coming from you right now, so it's
That's good. I'm glad. I have honesty. If you can fake that, you're in. No, I am genuinely interested.
Next stop, the New Yorker.
Next stop, the New Yorker, baby. Remnick. I don't know why I like saying that name so much, but he's not even there anymore, is he?
I think he still is.
Okay.
Well, actually, I haven't been following it very closely, but I mean, if he's still there, he's been there an awful long time now.
Yeah.
But I actually have no idea.
Who knows? Jason, do you have any plugs?
I don't.
Hell yeah, I'll just link to your Twitter and your pages or anything like that.
Cartoonist, because I think of myself as a hack.
Yeah, we're all hacks.
Freelancing background.
Yeah. We're all jerks. We're all jerks here. That's why you're on the Jerk Podcast, House of Decline. All right, take care, Jason. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye, everybody.